All right, so thanks everyone for being here this evening for our first CMI family training. We wanted to put this session together for you all to give you a sense of some tips and tricks you can do at home to help your students in learning. And I have Miriam Khan, one of our school social workers, here with us today, as well as our occupational therapist, Erin Waymer, who will be able to share some tips as well. So let's get started. So before we kind of dive into the information, I just wanted to consider a disclaimer in that we hope that much of this information is useful and helpful to you all in the work that you do with your students at home, but we also understand that some families just won't be able to implement these sorts of things. And so take what you like from this session, leave what you don't, and know that we're here to help you and your child be successful in this time of learning at home. Some just session norms. If you could just stay muted throughout the session unless prompted to unmute, that'll just make it easier for us to, consider any background noise or anything like that. And if any questions come up during the time that myself or any of our team members are speaking, feel free to drop a question in the chat, but we'll also have some pauses here and there for live questions and an additional Q&A at the end of the session. And again, remember, this is a time for all of us to learn. So even if you are not sure you want to ask the question, ask it anyway, because what we talk about could benefit not only you, but someone else on the call as well. Here, right, is our agenda for the evening. So we're going to talk about setting up a learning environment, being prepared for learning, supporting your child emotionally, which Miriam will talk about, self-regulation in a remote learning environment, which Erin will speak to. And then I'll talk about a few things you can do to support learning as a parent, and some additional resources will also be shared that you can take a look at after the session. We'll share a deck of these slides in the chat at the end of the session, which you'll be able to access and be able to check out the links that we are sharing. All right, so in terms of a learning environment that you want to set up, you want to create a space, much like what you see in the pictures, a place that can be the child's schooling space. So we don't recommend that students are sitting on a couch or sitting in bed unless there's no other options. We also recommend that if you can, to post a schedule of your child's day in a place that's accessible. So, potentially right on the wall next to their computer space. We also recommend that you have them have their learning materials available and ready to go before learning starts, so they're not looking for them during a session, or having to get up during a session to go and find things that they need to be successful during that learning period that they are participating in. We also think it's just a good idea, and I think something we often do as adults, which is to have the child log into Zoom 5 minutes prior in case the session needs some troubleshooting, whether it be like the microphone is not working, video is not working, any sorts of technical issues. Just logging in a little early gives time to get settled into the session before the learning starts. And another thing too that you want to consider is creating some sort of structure for your child during the times they're not expected to be in live sessions, whether it be this is snack time, or this is a time to get our bodies busy and allow us to take a break from learning. It's really important to just, as much as possible, create a structure for your students, because in the school day, we as classroom teachers create structures for our kids that are consistent and predictable so they feel safe in the learning environment. And just make sure that students are not eating during sessions, that they eat before or after a session that's live. So I'm going to just pop it over to Erin to speak to the group about seating and comfort and the importance of this during live sessions and not asynchronous sessions.
Hi, I'm Erin. I'm an occupational therapist at Creative Minds, and as Amita said, I just want to talk about what an ideal seating position is, how you can get it in your home environment, and just simple adjustments that you can make. So really what we're looking for is a stable base of support, which is essential for fine motor skills and to attend. If kids aren't feeling comfortable, if they're worried about their feet not on the floor, then they're not able to attend to what's going on in classes. So a general rule of thumb is just 90, 90, 90. So you want your feet resting flat on the floor with the ankles at a 90-degree angle, knees bent to 90 degrees, 1 to 2 inches from the seat of the chair, and then your hips to the back of the chair at a 90-degree angle. So on this picture, you can see on the top left-hand corner, this child's feet are dangling. He doesn't look very comfortable, and it's really hard for him to reach his computer. At the bottom picture, they've actually put a step stool to ground his feet. So that's a great tip if your chairs are too high, to put a stool or a box or books. If your seat's too low, you can put a seat cushion to raise it. And then if you notice, if you look really closely, there's a pillow. The seat is too wide for him, so they have a pillow in between his back and the back of the chair to help promote that upright posture. A couple of other quick tips that I have are just alternating work centers. So kids are sitting for a long time on Zoom sessions. If they're not in Zoom sessions, let them take a break. Let them read on the floor. Do things while standing just to kind of recruit different muscles. And then lastly, just a quick item that you might have at your house that's also great to mix it up in terms of seating is a yoga ball. This just kind of promotes that upright posture and is a little bit motivating and fun for children as well.
Thank you, Erin. Are there any specific questions from the group now about setting up a learning environment? Feel free to unmute yourself to ask your question.
I have a question related to this movement issue around seating. You know, so far, my sort of observation is that my son, both my kids actually can't sit, like they're going to be moving. And I know that there's some like classroom expectations that kids be looking at the screen and at the teacher. And I'm not sure how much I should really be enforcing that, because their natural inclination is just to always be moving. And just because they're not looking at the screen doesn't mean they're not listening. So I was wondering if you had any feedback around just movement in general during a session, like not, because kids in the class often aren't sitting, right? They're standing, right. They're moving side to side. So any sort of feedback on that would be great.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that one thing I'd recommend is just doing a little movement before a session. So letting them do like a quick Go Noodle video, then getting it out. And then really, if you're able to, see how long they can sit and if that's realistic. If not, you can even move the computer so they're standing, but they're still looking, but they're like moving their feet, moving their body. I think those are some simple fixes as well. Or like I mentioned, if there's anything in your house, like a yoga ball, bean bags, anything that's a little bit more comfortable, that allows more movement, but they can still be visually attending. I think any of those could be helpful options.
I just wanted to add, I think it's also our teachers understand that it's going to be hard for the students and it's going to be an adjustment period. So I imagine our teachers are not going to be sticklers for you have to be sitting straight and moving, because they understand that that's very difficult for students. So Kara, I hear what you're saying, and you know, the teachers are going to be flexible with that.
Thank you.
Sure. So some sort of expectations we were considering in thinking about having the students prepared for learning is sharing some expectations that you have for them with regard to how you want them to engage in the learning experience. I think for us as parents, it's really important that we are patient, supportive, and encouraging of the students as they're transitioning to this very consistent learning experience in the home setting, which is very unlike what they're used to. So give your kids space to figure it out. Be supportive and ask how things are going. You can have them just talk to you about what is uncomfortable about the experience, and then just encourage them to continue to participate and have fun with this new experience. And then, it's of course important to balance your expectations with the classroom expectations, and just know that the teachers want our kids to be successful. So if things are proving difficult, it's important to connect with the teacher to find solutions. So I'm gonna hand it over to Miriam to talk about supporting your child emotionally during this time.
Awesome. So hi everyone, my name is Miriam. I am CMI's school social worker. I see some familiar faces and names, so it's good to see everyone again. So I put this quote up here because I heard this at the beginning of the pandemic, and it really struck a chord with me that, while we all are in this same storm of COVID and a global pandemic, not everyone is experiencing this in the same boat. We're all coming from our own experiences. We're bringing to the table, every family is different. And I just wanted to honor that and respect that and kind of put that out there for a moment, because obviously we're providing suggestions and strategies and ideas. And I think to Amita's disclaimer at the beginning, I just want to make sure that families know that, our expectation isn't that it's a one size fits all, and that all these tools are going to be effective for every single family. We know that everyone is, coming from their own sort of experience or situation, and we, acknowledge that. Go to the next slide. So I personally feel like we could do lots of sessions just on the topic of supporting kids emotionally, especially right now. So please know that this is just going to be general overview. And I'm definitely happy to answer questions or, provide additional resources afterwards. But first and foremost, I think it's really, really important that we just remember that stress is a normal physical response to a threat, right? To perceived danger. And we are living through prolonged activation of the stress response. So anxiety is our body's way of trying to protect us. And we know that it's working because it's working in overdrive right now. And I put this on here just as a reminder to give ourselves grace throughout this. I originally had a picture of, putting the oxygen mask on yourself first before helping the kid. And I think that is so key. And of course, that's going to look different for each person and what our capacity is. But just knowing that the stress, it is real. And, we hear that and see that. And then really just making sure that we are validating children's feelings. There is a lot of uncertainty. There are a lot of unanswered questions. And I know that as parents, the natural instinct is to have the answers and to solve problems for our kids, right? So I think it's okay to model some of that acceptance of uncomfortable feelings and of that uncertainty. And on the next slide, we'll give some examples of some language that you can use with your children at home. And also just being mindful about how we talk about school. Kids are constantly taking in information and observing our reactions and how we respond to things. So just being mindful of, can we talk about this new school year in a way that is, laying out the facts without placing judgment or predictions about what might happen? Because that might prime a child to sort of go into a lesson or a classroom experience in a different lens. So that might be saying, hey, this year is going to be online, right? You're going to be doing your lessons on a computer. That's a fact. And that's okay. Versus you're going to be doing your lessons on a computer and it's probably going to be way different and harder and more challenging than before, right? That has a level of judgment attached to it versus just sort of laying out the facts. And then if there are questions or predictions that, the child has, opening up the space for them to ask them. And then really ensuring that above all else, we're prioritizing the emotional well-being of our children. I know patience runs thin, and I certainly hear that and respect that. But if we can try to view, taking that 5-minute break to take a deep breath or get a drink of water or do your jumping jacks or do whatever it is that works for your child, try to see that as an investment for time that they can bank back later versus trying to, have them sit to complete the lesson because it needs to get done. But, you see that they're fuming and they're about to explode, right? It's worth it on the front end to, give them that space to, take that break initially so that they can come back to learning. And we know, and sort of how the brain works, that the lid gets flipped in a child's brain, which just means that the upstairs and downstairs part of the brain aren't speaking to each other anymore, and we're not responding in a very logical way, that kids cannot access learning when they're in that space. So they might need to do something to calm their bodies and get themselves back to that sort of regulated and focused state before they can really access the learning. And then finally, just reassuring them that they are safe and that you're going to be there for them. But to also give them the space to talk about their worries and what's on their mind, and to try to listen non-judgmentally, and to keep the focus on sort of what is within their control. I don't know if people have seen the visual of sort of like 2 plates, right? Like what is on our plate that is within our control, and what are the things sort of outside of the plate or on a different plate that are outside of the realm of, what we can actually realistically take action on. But we know that what we focus on grows. So if we are focusing on the elements of the situation that are within our control, that's what's going to continue to grow and strengthen. So I won't read through all of these. You will get a copy of the deck at the end, but these are just some examples of some responses that you can offer in, perhaps challenging situations or conversations that you may have with your children. So I think one of the ones I definitely want to point out is, how do we model acceptance of feelings of discomfort or uncertainty? There's a lot of questions that kids have that we probably have as well, right? When is this going to end? When are we going to go back to school in person? And it's okay to say, these are really, really great questions. I don't have an answer for that right away. And that's okay, right? I'm also trying to figure this out, and to model that it's okay not to have all the answers right away. And then also highlighting the last 2, trying to offer support while also setting limits, right? Easier said than done. But, being able to say, hey, I see that you're really having a hard time with this, and I really care about you. Here are our choices, right? Lay out some options, especially for younger kids. We can either take a break. We can either, break the task down into a couple, smaller tasks, or we can get a drink of water, right? And then let them choose. So they still have some agency and ownership over the situation, but it's sort of within the confines of the limits that you set. And especially with online learning, there's likely going to be some frustration, right? You can't necessarily get that immediate, raising your hand, having a teacher come over to you and have a private conversation to get assistance in quite the same way that, you would. So being able to really be with them in that moment. And this is something that I personally have always struggled with a little bit, because it's so natural to want to fix the problem, right? And that's the instinct, is to, how can we solve this? But what we find in, the therapeutic response is that being able, and this is actually pulled directly from conscious discipline, but being able to just reflect back the feeling that they might be experiencing. So like, hey, I'm noticing that your face is going like this and it's getting really scrunched up. You seem like you're pretty mad. You were really hoping to get that problem right. And it gives them the space to correct you if you're off base, and they're like, no, that's not what it was. And then they can correct and explain what is on their mind. But a lot of times kids will say, yeah, I've been working really hard and I just can't get it, right? So really just taking the time and giving them the space to reflect back that feeling. I know that was a lot of information at once, so I'll pause in case there's any questions or thoughts.
Great, thank you, Miriam. Now we're gonna hand it back over to Erin to talk about self-regulation in a remote learning environment.
Hi, it's Erin again. So I just wanted to talk more, like Amita said, about self-regulation. So just kind of to set the stage. When kids are looking at screens, they're seeing 72 frames per second, when in the classroom, in person and in real life, they're seeing 4 frames per second. So this, combined with some of the emotional dysregulation and just the fact that I kind of alluded to earlier, decreased levels of physical activity, kids across the board are more dysregulated. And I just want to kind of define self-regulation and what that means in general and what that means to us. So Ms. Miriam and I follow a curriculum, the zones of regulation. So according to that, self-regulation is the ability to do what needs to be done in the optimal state for a given situation. This includes regulating one's sensory needs, emotions, and impulses to meet the demands of the environment, reach one's goals, and behave in a socially appropriate way. So to Ms. Miriam and I, a little bit more generally, this means identifying emotions and body signs to get your body in a calm and an alert state to be ready for learning. Thinking through how to support this in a home environment, one thing that came to mind was just to have a check-in sheet. So a visual aid is always super helpful for kids to be able to identify how they're feeling and what they might need to do to be ready for learning that day. So in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see a different example. So one is a Lego representation of all the different zones. Another one is just a poster. And why this can help is just, you know, starting your day off. I recommend doing it in the morning and just kind of all checking in as a family to say, like, how are we feeling? You don't always need to be in the green or go zone, but what tools can I use to be successful today? Or what do I want to try to be successful? And I want to reiterate that these tools look different based on how you're feeling and just what feels good to you. So for some kids, it might be breathing. For other kids, it might be using fidgets. A really easy way to just get overall organizing input for your body is simple movement activities that you can incorporate in the day. So like when there's Zoom breaks, having kids do animal walks, wall push-ups, carrying heavy objects. Those are all great simple tools that you don't need anything. You can just implement them at home. And then Amita, I don't know if you want to click, but one of my colleagues created a Calm Corner. And this has all those different types of sensory input that I talked about. And really you can use those tools. So if you're worried that you don't physically have a fidget spinner, there's a place in here that you can click on one. Or if for your child listening to music is really regulating, there is a link that has calming music. So I thought that that could be a great resource as well.
Thanks, Erin. I'm going to shift back to the slides. And yeah, if you look, it just says click here at each of the different points on the screen. And you'll, at the end, like I said before, you'll get a this deck directly in the chat so you can explore this tool.
Were there any questions on that?
Erin, I see that there is a question of whether or not this concept will be introduced in the classroom and if we could share one of the charts or tools for us to use. So I can share really briefly. I know that certainly when we are in the school building, I know a lot of teachers already use some sort of, whether it's a zones check-in or some other sort of like feelings check-in that they'll have in the classroom where kids are able to go over and kind of move it themselves and figure out what tools they need. So I know that that exists. And then Erin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're sharing many of these tools that are referenced in here at the end of the presentation.
Yes, so there is a whole, exactly, and they have a whole recommendations for home learning and like an example chart and just ways to like simply implement this in your household as well that we are going to share and follow up to this meeting.
Thank you, Erin. So here are just some tips for participating and supporting learning as a parent. And if you are in a position to support your student while they're learning, you can consider yourself a teacher's assistant, and we really appreciate all the support that you can provide your student during this time. So these are just 3 sort of tools that we use in the classroom that we thought were beneficial to share with you all. One of the things that we use consistently across all classrooms is wait time. It is one of the best strategies as a teacher that you can enact. So you use wait time when you're allowing a student to gather their thoughts after a question has been asked, and giving them space to think about it. And so typically we'll say give at least 10 full seconds for students to think. And oftentimes in the classroom, we'll see, after a question has been asked, hands shoot up, but there are students who need a little bit more time to think through what they want to say, and that's wonderful. And so we want to honor that as well. So you can do the same if, let's say you're working with your child and you've asked a question, give them some time to answer. And in the same vein, questioning, like asking the right questions and asking them once is key, and giving that wait time. And we refrain from repeating a question over and over again because that can overwhelm a child. And if they're not sure, it's always totally appropriate to come back to the question later. And then finally, the last sort of general strategy to offer is proximity. Like have close proximity to your child while they're working, but also give them space so that they don't feel crowded while they're working. And you can also do this in a way that says, hey, I'm in the other room. You just call me when you're ready for me to come and check in with you. Or I'm going to, set a timer and I'm going to come and check in with you in 3 minutes. So, work on what it is that you're working on, and we'll have a quick conversation about it after that 3-minute timer goes off. So those are just some general quick little strategies that we thought were helpful to share with you all. Are there any questions about that? Okay, great. So finally, this is the list of some resources to review. Here on that first bullet is a sample visual of expectations you can post at home that are very similar to the ones that I reviewed in our first slide. Then the second link is how you could make a portable study station using a little caddy. And then the third link is just a link that shows some home study station examples. So you can look at some different ways in which people have set their kids up for learning at home and find some ideas for what works. And I think in that sort of environment, it's really nice to have the kids buy in. So setting it up together and, getting the things that'll make them really excited about the space is really nice. If you can sort of imagine like your own home learning environment when you were younger, you had a desk that you liked or some tools that really made you feel excited about learning, or even now as an adult in your workspace. It's the same sort of idea. Making it fun and inviting for the kids is really helpful. And then that fourth link is a set of visual directions for Zoom that you can use that just outline how to link into a Zoom session. So that's a great site to check out. And then a few tips for avoiding any homework battles. And then OSSI, which is our State Superintendent of Education, they've created a special education resource hub. So that's linked there, and it has a lot of interesting tools and resources that you can review at your leisure that might help you in just understanding how special ed is working in this environment as well. And then on the regulation note, the Zones of Regulation resource site is linked, as well as a PDF to guide conversations that you can have with your students with regard to how they're feeling and what zone they're in. Are there any additional or final questions? Anything more that you'd like to know? What we were talking about before we started this session is doing this as an ongoing learning series once every 3 to 4 weeks for families to join and talk through any challenges that they're having and get more information about how they can continue to help their child be successful at home in learning. I see a raised hand. Danielle, would you like to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Yes. I was wondering because the schedule that you guys had sent out was kind of complicated to kind of guide Zion into his day-to-day routine on logging in and putting things in, the password and everything. Is there any way that you guys can, I know, like when it comes to Zoom, that they could just click a link, or can it be some type of notification could be indicated, or some type of chime that could come on the screen to let them know that, hey, you do to do this, and all they have to do is hit the link and be connected to their classroom? Because I'm working from home and it's kind of like it's awkward, and sometimes I'm like in between calls, but I just wish it was a better way.
Yeah, I know. I think many parents share that same concern. I know our teachers are creating individual schedules for the students, so that hopefully will help. One way that you can set your student up for success in that regard is having a calendar on either Google or something that you use that you can input the links at the times that the student has to be in a session that would then ping them on the computer. I'm not sure if anybody else has some ideas on that. I'm happy to hear. But I think as Adi said, setting up a Google Calendar would be helpful. One thing too, I'll share this question, Danielle, with our IT folks and with Andy, who oversees technology at our school.
Okay, thank you. Is this somewhere that it could be accessible on the school equipment? Because that's the thing, everything were put onto the school equipment that will be needed for this school year. So is Google Calendar included with that?
You have a Chromebook, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so typically if it's a Chromebook, you would have access to the Google suite of services, which includes the calendar, which is generally, most people link it to their email. But yeah, like I said, let me find out from Carlos and Andy about that, and I'll reach out to you directly when I have an answer.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions?
Amita, there's a question in the chat from Jennifer about if we can explain how special educators and dedicated aides are going to be working with kids over Zoom.
Yeah, sure. So I hope that you got my initial email, Jenny. Our general education program allowed for us to have some really great opportunities to have students participate in small group sessions with our kids. And so our inclusion teachers will be participating in those sessions. And then our dedicated aides will participate in those sessions in addition to scheduling sessions outside of those with your student. And then the same goes for additional sessions for inclusion teachers. Those sessions will be scheduled with you next week because we wanted our related service providers to have the first sort of round of scheduling to not overwhelm families with a bunch of communication about scheduling services all at once. So you'll be hearing from your inclusion teacher next week to schedule those additional services.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I just wanted, if I can ask, just make a comment. I just wanted to say how pleased I am with this small group meetings. In the spring, my son had a really hard time with the isolation. I'm sure this is true for everyone, and felt he was just depressed. And I do want to just affirm how important I think these small group gatherings are for kids to be able to talk with one another. I really appreciate it, and I hope that I imagine that will continue, but I can already tell what a difference for him it has been, because last spring was really, really hard emotionally for him because of the isolation, and it has made a huge difference with having these small. I can already tell just in the last few days what a difference it's made for him, because it's in the large group setting, on Zoom he's not going to participate or interact, but with the small groups it's much easier for him. So I just want to say thank you for that.
That's great to hear, Kara. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I just want to piggyback on that. I think that's something that we really wanted to prioritize. We knew it was going to be super hard scheduling a bunch of small groups, but we thought it was super important to prioritize that. And that explains some of the difficulties with parents, like knowing where to sign on, but we really knew that this was going to be important and support our students. And, you know, after we get over this hurdle with, you know, figuring out where to go in the long term, we felt that this was going to be super helpful for our students. So thank you for sharing that. That gives us reassurance that we prioritize the right thing. We could have had everyone go into one class and stay there and have large groups, but we realized that that was not what was going to be best for students. And we just continue to prioritize that as we kind of make these decisions about distance learning.
Thanks for sharing that, Ayamka. That I think was helpful for everybody to hear. Are there any other last thoughts or questions before we wrap up?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask one, if you don't mind. So first of all, I just want to thank you for this and for the start of the year. It's been really amazing. We are a new family. I've got 3 kids in the school, so it's a lot, but we're really very impressed and appreciative of all the efforts. So one question that obviously is specific, but I imagine other parents are struggling with is, we have one child who is a more emerging reader and is struggling with wanting to speak up in questions that arise in the chat, but not having the ability to put his thoughts to finding the right keys on the keyboard at the speed that his classmates might be able to do. And so always feeling like he's the last to respond, or he's not getting the opportunity to kind of chime in. So just wondering your thoughts on how to balance that. I think the teachers are doing a phenomenal job of making sure everyone is heard. So I don't want to, it's a personal matter for him, but just really interested to hear your thoughts about maybe tools or suggestions to employ in those situations.
Are you able to work with the student at the time?
Yeah, so what I've been doing right now is kind of coming in and typing for him, and him dictating to me, and we can certainly do a voice to text, but again, kind of, I don't know how that works with Zoom, to be honest. If he's muted, if he's able to utilize, I just don't know. So again, maybe this is a more specific question that is unique to us, in which case I can certainly take it offline, but in case other people are dealing with the same struggles, I just wanted to put it out there.
Yeah, that would be a good question for our tech gurus, because I'm not sure about that, honestly. Anybody else have some ideas to share about that? If they have any ideas about our technology and that capability of text to, or voice to text, rather?
I just wanted to say I'm not sure about that, but we do have access for free from school emails to a typing resource. So I know that there's a lot to balance right now, but if it sounds like it's some of the spelling and the typing, but if you have the capacity and want to build that skill, you're able to do that through Clever, which could be another good option to kind of combine some of those areas.
Yeah. I think I was wondering more from the perspective of the community building and kind of making sure that, the access, the assistive technology stuff, I'll get with the tech people and we'll work that out. But I'm more just wondering in terms of the experience of wanting to participate in the classroom and having that, again, I think at all ages, they're struggling with different things. So that's just our observation.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, though.
Yeah. As we were talking, you were saying that, I was wondering, the raise hand function that you used just now to kind of engage. I wonder if that's something that could be a strategy or an accommodation that could be considered, that the student could raise their hand to participate. I wonder if that's possible, even if, because the teacher can then unmute the student during the session, if that's appropriate.
I was just thinking, I've been there sometimes when my son is in Zooms, but I can't do it all the time. I don't even know if they're using the chat function in the third grade. Like I haven't noticed them doing it, but maybe they are. If they are, I will be worried because Ruben won't be able to read it. And I'm not sure how you would have like a text to speech thing going on while the teacher's also talking. So it seems like something for, obviously teachers have like huge amounts of stuff they're trying to do, but to be aware, like if there's a whole side conversation happening in the chat that just may not be accessible at all to some kids. So it may be important to like read it out loud or ask the kids to talk instead of typing. And also I imagine it would be hard even for kids who can type to do it on an iPad because of the weird little.
Yeah, I want to chime in and say, I was in a morning meeting today, and I think it could have just been the particular one that I was in, but the teachers did a really nice job of using a few different like options for ways for students to respond, whether it's chat or, showing a body movement or just, being really creative in the ways that, students can engage. And so I guess putting this out there for our CMI team, I think this would be really awesome feedback to provide to our already incredible teaching team, just to say, hey, this is just something to continue to keep in mind, whether it's drawing your response or giving a thumb up or doing something just to engage, because not every student learns and responds in the same way. So I think that's really helpful and important for us to note.
I don't want to like ask too many questions here if other people have questions, but I had one more question about the office hours thing that's starting next week. Like I think that both of my kids probably would do better with the homework that they're eventually going to have if they thought they were supposed to do it at a specific time and there's a teacher sort of supervising. And I don't know if the idea of office hours is that they could sort of log on to it and just have it be there while they do their homework and ask questions as they come up, or if it's more like they're supposed to schedule or just drop in for a minute to ask a discrete question, or what.
I think
And then also I wanted to say the teachers are doing a really great job.
Yeah, I think office hours can be whatever the kids need. I don't necessarily think that teachers are following a specific script for office hours. So if a student wants to stay on during the time that they're working, I don't think that any teacher would oppose that. If they wanted to just drop in for a question, that's fine too. I can't imagine anybody would deny a child the ability to spend time with them to work through an issue that they might be grappling with while they're doing their work. Are there any other questions or thoughts?
Yeah, hi, this is Sarah. My child is in the 8th grade and she did I think it's music and PE today, and she said it was 40 people in one Zoom class. And that was for music and PE. I was trying to see if will they be able to do 7th grade, one Zoom class for 7th grade and one Zoom class for 8th grade, for it will not be that much people in one Zoom class.
Sarah, thanks for asking that. I also was in that music class and the PE class with, I think it was 46 in the class. Those classes, since we were not sure how many students were going to come up, because given, from what we heard, a lot of parents that's a lot of sessions that we're offering. So that is something that we're considering. I have to say, actually, the PE, I was very impressed with the 46, like the kids were doing those activities and, playing the game. I was very impressed, but I was also, with that number, that is, way outside our ratio that we'd like to have for teacher student. So thanks for bringing that up. This is something that, we realized today. And so we'll continue to monitor that, but that is, way outside the ratio that we'd like to have for student teachers.
Thank you.
All right, well, if there are no further questions, we'll wrap up. Miriam or Erin, can you drop a link to the deck that I shared with you for families into the chat so they can have access to the slides?
Yes, give me one moment.
Thank you. So for next time's session, what we'll do is we'll send out the registration link, much like we did last time, and you can share any questions that you have ahead of the session so we can make sure that we tailor it to whatever our families need 3 to 4 weeks from now. All right, Miriam just dropped the link to the deck in the chat. So please, feel free to peruse those resources that we shared with you. Let us know if they're helpful to you. And thank you again for your participation and engagement during this session. I know it's tough at the end of the day to do so. And while you're managing both your own schedule and your child's schedule, we really appreciate your commitment to our school and to our community. And thanks for being here. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Stay safe.
You too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Have a good night, everybody. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Meredith.